As you watch this videotape, please imagine yourself in the shop having a relaxed visit with a real old-timer in this electrical business. That's me, Jack Benfield, author of the Benfield Conduit Bending Manual by EC&M. Although I am now an octogenarian, my proudest achievement in life is helping to make conduit bending a simple technique. Since way back in the 1930s, I've been visiting with electricians all over the free world. I owe what I've learned about conduit bending to the constructive suggestions, the know-how, and the dozens of hints and tips that I've had from electricians on the job. By the way, please excuse these screwball glasses of mine. I call these my fresh air, no fog bifocals. The source of what you're about to see and hear is a composite of the know-how from hundreds of your brother electricians, and conduit bending has been made simple. Any electrician that masters these simple, down-to-earth rules will make perfect conduit bends for the rest of his or her life. This is a generic training video. It is not a sales pitch for anything. The instructions are 100% generic because the technique works for all fixed radius benders, no exceptions. At the outset, I wish to express my regrets that at 87 years of age, I lack the physical stamina to produce a complete new action video. Therefore, please receive in good grace my original clips that follow. There are other good benders on the market today. They have fine, distinctive features. I commend them all for the contribution they have made to better bending. So think generic. It's the key word to describe a training video that works for any bender that may be found on any job.
Now in my hand here is a typical Benfield bender. We call it our number 1 for half-inch thin wall conduit. All Benfields are virtually indestructible because they're made of tough alloy milled iron. Note the heavy reinforced hook, double thick sections throughout the entire bender. These big bold painted symbols are countersunk. Now countersinking the symbols is very important because the arrow and the star point are important guide marks for accuracy. The dirtier the tool gets out on a construction job, the easier it is to read the countersunk symbols. Note the back of this hook. The flat back has outriggers that are factory ground square and smooth to form a perfect T-square with the handle. Therefore, under foot pressure, the conduit must bend straight up, perpendicular to the floor. Thus, dog legs are eliminated. Also note the cast-in iron degree scale. The scale on the front face of the bender is our degree scale. These degree slash marks are pierced by big, bold numerals. Included are 5 different degrees of angle: 10 degree, 22 degree, 30 degree, 45, and 60. Now on the opposite side, parallel with this degree scale, is a cooperating offset multiplier scale. Here's how it works. Suppose you decide to make an offset using 30-degree bends. On the back side of the tool, opposite the 30-degree slash mark, the multiplier scale, which is a counterpart to the degree scale, says multiply by 2. Here it is multiplied by 2. Example, to make a 10-inch deep offset using 30-degree bends, you simply multiply 10 times 2 and place the marks on the conduit 20 inches apart. Make a 30-degree bend at this mark and a 30-degree bend at the other mark, and in the opposite direction, and you've made an exact 10-inch bust. That's how my offset formula works. It's a forever reference at point of use because it's cast right into the tool itself. Let me read it to you slowly. It says, cast in big bold letters, depth times multiplier equals distance between bends. Also note that on both sides of the tool, we provide a teardrop symbol. This teardrop symbol denotes the exact center of a 45-degree bend. It's on both sides of the tool. Now this symbol is for centering a 3-bend saddle. The Benfield Techniques works with any make of conduit bender that you may find on any job.
This new second edition manual includes 2 new chapters, bending PVC conduits and bending with ratchet type Chicago benders. Chapter 7 details a new technique for making 90-degree compound bends.
Now I'm going to demonstrate the most common bend, the stub-up bend. Now, there are several different ways of making a stub-up. The first way I'm going to show you is by marking the conduit. Now this is not the fastest way, but it's the best way if you're interested in making the precision bend on exposed work. Let's suppose we want to make a bend up to the top of this box. Now this box measures 12 inches. I'm going to make a stub-up bend to come along this board here and end up right at the top of this box. The bender takes up 5 inches. There it is right on the bender. Stubs take up 5 inches to the arrow. So if the bender takes up 5 inches and I want to make a 12-inch stub, I simply mark the conduit at 7 inches because the 7 inches from my mark to the end of the conduit plus the 5 inches in the bender should give me 12 inches. Well, put a mark like 7 inches. Now it's always best to dribble your mark around the conduit so that it doesn't disappear on you when you put it back into the groove. Now the base symbol for stub-up bends is the arrow. Notice the red arrow is opposite the 7-inch mark. Now, in this position, I find, while I'm a right-handed man, I like to bend with my right foot on the conduit and my left foot on the step on the pedal of the bender. So, notice that I'm not using much arm pressure. I'm bending mostly with my foot. Notice, too, the outrigger on the back of the hook is going to make it bend straight up, perpendicular to the floor. Well, there, that's a 290. There I am, right on the mark. Now that's method number 1. Now method number 2 is what we call the folding rule method. We do that, we make this stub 12 inches high without putting a mark on the conduit at all. And here's how we do it. We simply lay the folding rule, or tape measure, alongside the conduit, so that the 5-inch mark on my ruler is opposite the very end of the conduit. Now I place my bender on the conduit so the arrow is pointing at my 12-inch mark. Now, if I eyeball that properly, I should wind up with a fairly accurate stub-up bend. And you notice that I haven't bent that a little bit beyond the 90. All of our benders are designed to go beyond the 90. Instead of some conduit will spring back. But there it is, I'm within 1/8 of an inch of being 12 by 12-inch stub. Now that's method number 2. Now method number 3 is what we call our thumbnail and eyeball method. Here's a procedure for making this type of a stub. You simply place your thumbnail where you want for the length of stub you want. You hook the bender on the conduit so that if you drop the plumb line from the very edge of the back of the groove down, it would hit your thumbnail. That depends on how good you are with your eyeball. Now, as I said, this is not the fastest method. They're pouring concrete behind you, and you want that stub up bend 12 inches. I'm there within 1/4 inch. And I haven't marked the conduit, and I haven't used the ruler. That's the thumbnail eyeball. Now there's a 4th way. Now I know none of you fellas would make a stub up bend by bending it long, then cutting it down to fit. But it does happen once in a while. Now I know that it happened down in Crumpler, North Carolina. A little town down there. It's about midway between Goat Gap Gulch, Grassy Creek, and Roaring Gap. I can safely mention Crumpler because I have relatives down there. The back-to-back bend is a term accepted by the electrical trade, but really it's a misnomer. It means the distance from any fixed point on the conduit to the back of a 90-degree bend. Now, this illustration from the manual shows 5 situations where the distance to the back of a 90-degree bend must be accurate. Now let's go through a typical back-to-back bend. Here in my hand is a piece of 1/2 inch thin wall conduit with a pre-bent 90-degree bend. I'm going to make a back-to-back bend with this bend resting on the floor, like so, and the back-to-back bend to come up and curl around here under the lip of this blackboard chalk tray. First I mark where I want the back of the bend to come. Put it on my mark so it doesn't disappear on me when I put it back in the bender. The bender on the conduit so at the start point the start point points at my pencil mark. Get everything lined up, because I want everything to be in the same plane. Make my 90-degree bend. That should fit. Probably got a little tiny bit more than 90. It should fit. And that's a perfect example of precision bending for back-to-back bends.
When making offsets, saddles, or concentric bends, accuracy in the degree of the angle bent is paramount. Even 2 or 3 degrees off target, plus or minus, will make the finished bend a poor fit. That is why the degree scale on the bender itself is so valuable. As this tape progresses, accuracy in the degree of angle in the bends I make will be proof that accuracy is paramount. If your bender has no degree scale, use a protractor. Do not guess.
My next basic technique is bending offsets. Offset bends are needed more than any other bend on construction work. I have a very simple technique for making precision offsets that fit perfectly every time. On the front side of the bender is a degree scale. It has degree slash marks at 10 degrees, 22, 30, 45, and 60 degrees. Opposite the degree scale, on the back side of the tool, is an offset multiplier scale. To find the distance between bends for a 10-degree bend, you would multiply the depth of offset times 6. But for a 22.5-degree bend, you multiply by 2.6. For a 30-degree bend, you multiply by 2. For a 45-degree bend, you multiply by 1.4. And for a 60-degree bend, you simply multiply by 1.2. But I like to work with 30-degree bends because it's easier to pull the wires, it's faster, and you don't have to fool around with fractions. You simply multiply by 2. The Benfield offset formula is easy to read, and it is cast permanently into the metal, and it reads, I want to repeat that again, the depth times the multiplier equals the distance between bends. There it is. It stays permanently on the tool as a forever reference for the electrician to follow right at the point of use. Now, let's see if I can make a 30-degree, using 30-degree bends, if I can make a bend to go over this box. First we'll measure the box. And we find it's 7.5 inches. I'm going to use 30-degree bends, so 7.5 times 2 is 15. Remember, 2 is my multiplier. So I place my marks on the conduit 15 inches apart. Put the first mark there. I'll mark 15 inches away. I go to the marks. Now it's best not to use too blunt a pencil, because the wider your mark, the more chance there is for inaccuracy. So we'll just make a normal pencil mark. Now I place my first mark at vertical. Now notice that the conduit is under my armpit. This is the best position to use because if you took the conduit under your arm like this, you get your pressure close in so that your conduit will bend on the bottom of the groove instead of popping up and bending out of the groove. Now as you make the bend, let the tool go forward. Let it walk forward. And when the conduit levels off, the bottom of the conduit is level with a 30-degree slack bar, you've got a 30-degree bend. Get everything in alignment. However, mark 15 inches away, remember, is also going to be at the arrow. Now I'm going to start my bend just a little bit, but I'm going to finish it on the floor. Now the reason I'm doing that is this. That on all Benfield benders, when the handle is straight up or perpendicular to the floor, you make a 30-degree bend in the conduit. Now let's see if you can fit. Here it is. It lays there just as smooth as though it was molded in place. Now suppose you want a little tighter distance between your bends, and you want to go to 45 degree. Use 45 degree bends to make you a closer coupled offset. So let's do that same bend, except this time I'm going to multiply by 1.4. Now 1.4 times 7.5, that's the depth of my offset. And 1.4 is the multiplier. 1.4 times 7.5 is 10.5. So I place my marks 10.5 inches apart. And I make 45 degree bends at each mark. This mark is 10.5 inches away from the first mark. Remember, the arrow is now your symbol to use as your base for bending offsets. Get the conduit under the armpit. This time we're going to make it 45. And another 45, 10.5 inches away. It's a good trick to line up everything. The first bend with a pipe, with a groove, with a handle of the bender, and even line it up with a crack in the floor, or a break in the terrazzo floor, or the edge of a carpet, or something you know is straight. Well, you can put your other 45, and you've got a closer couple bend. It should drop right in place. There it is. Just as smooth as a bug in a rug. Now, fellas, I want to see if I can't clear up the mystery for you electricians on the proper way to make a 3-bend saddle. For example, an electrician who can make a 3-bend saddle and cross it over a steam pipe without reworking it or fiddling around with it to make it fit is recognized as a tip-top conduit bending expert. Now let's simulate a 3-bend saddle using this ruler, and I'm making a pretend 3-bend saddle out of this ruler. Let's pretend this is the middle of our saddle bend, and that's going to be a 45 degree bend. And this leg is going to be 22.5, and this one 22.5. So now we've simulated a pipe saddle, a 3-bend pipe saddle. The main thing to remember is to make the center bend first, and then bend your 2 legs. Now if this is a 45, make the 2 legs each 22.5. And you'll come out with your saddle lined up properly. And let's see if we can demonstrate that with a piece of 1/2-inch thin ball conduit. And we're going to make a 3-bend saddle to go over that steam pipe. Now that can measures 3 1/4 inches. And I measured it ahead of time and figured it out. 3 1/4 inches is the diameter of that steam pipe. And for any 3-bend saddle, I don't care how deep it is, the multiplier is 2.5. So the 3 1/4 inch diameter times 2.5, I figured it out ahead of time, is 8 1/8 inches. So I place my center mark, and call that mark A, and I put a mark 8 1/8 inches away from that center mark and call that B, and I put another mark 8 1/8 inches to the other direction and call that C. Now I've got 3 marks on the conduit, and I'm going to work with 1/2-inch thin wall conduit. You recall we're going to place 3 marks on the conduit. This is the center mark. We're going to call that mark A. This is mark B, 8 1/8 inches away. This is mark C, also 8 1/8 inches away. And we're going to jump over that 3 1/4 inch steam pipe. First you line up the mark A with the teardrop symbol. That's on both sides of the tool, but make a 45-degree bend. That's your center bend. Now you drop down to the arrow. You're going to use the arrow as your base symbol. At this point, you want to get everything into alignment. Slide it across. The first bend lines up with the groove, the handle, this part of this straight part of the pipe. Everything is in perfect plane. Now we're going to make a 22.5-degree bend. And switch to mark C. Line that up with the arrow. Make sure everything is in alignment. And make another 22.5-degree bend. There we have a 3-bend saddle, and that should be right where I started, right in the middle of that piece of conduit. Now let's see if it fits. There it is, just as though it were molded in place. Sometimes you have to fiddle with these a little tiny bit. For instance, you notice that is laying up there about an inch. But if I tap it on the back, it lays there almost as flat as a pancake. Now let's cover 4-bend saddles. But before I get into the 4-bend saddle technique, I want to apologize to you fellas for these screwball glasses I'm wearing. They are sort of odd. When I was in London, England recently, one of these lenses fell out. I went to an optometrist, and he looked at my frames, and he poked his finger through here, and he says, "Oh," he says, "that's just what we need in London. Fresh air, no fog, bifocals." I need correction only for close work, and the air is pretty bad these days, and people say, well, why don't you look through clear glass? But I say, look, why look through anything? The air is bad enough. Now let's get on with this four-bend saddle business. A four-bend saddle is simply two offsets in tandem. All you do is use the offset formula, as I explained earlier, and allow enough straight pipe to clear the obstruction and with the first offset before you start the second offset. Now you make the second offset and you've got a four-bend saddle. It's just as simple as that. Just two offsets in tandem. Now, fellas, if you've had trouble making offsets and saddles to fit, maybe it's not your fault. To illustrate the importance of an accurate degree scale on the tool itself, let's look at that 7.5-inch deep offset and watch me as I add just 1 or 2 degrees to each leg of that offset. Even a 2 or 3 degree error in the angle of that offset will make it miss by several inches. Now you recall a few minutes ago I made an offset with 30-degree bends to go to this 7.5-inch box. There it is. 7.5-inch deep offset with 30-degree bends. Now I'm going to add a little bit to each bend. This is just to prove how important it is that the bender itself have a degree scale that's built to precision. So I'm just going to add a little touch to each bend. Let's see how important it is to be accurate. Now let's cover the proper technique for best results with foot pedal benders. We call this model our power jack bender. It has a 2-position foot pedal that gives the electrician 200% more power leverage. The power jack has other features, such as an arrow for stub-ups. There's the arrow, a star point for back-to-back bends, a degree scale, just like we have on the other Benfield benders, and the back of the hook has big, wide, 4-inch wide outriggers to provide stability. Some of you electricians call this bender the big blockbuster. It is a big son of a gun, but it does the job. Now, it isn't a bender that you would select to make 200 or 300 bends a day, but for that kick around a drain pipe, or that occasional bend in 1.25 thin wall, or 1-inch rigid conduit, or of course the 1-inch IMC conduit, the power jack is a worthy addition to any electrical contractor's service truck. The things to remember about this tool are, 1, use plenty of foot pressure, and 2, don't have your handle too long. A handle that's too long will invite too much arm pressure, and that's bad. The handle length should be 54 inches maximum. Now, let's suppose we want to make a 20-inch stub-up. Now, the bender takes up 11 inches. So I place a mark at 9 inches. 11 plus 9 will give us 20. So I've got my arrow is on my 9-inch mark. It's 9 inches from the arrow to the end of the conduit. That plus my 11 inches in the bender should give me a 20-inch stub-up. Now, try and get next to a bench like this to give you stability. And notice that the ball of my foot is out at the very tip end of this step. That gives me the maximum leverage. So get up on the tool, and first I'm going to break it. I'll just I've only bent to about 30 degrees at this point. And remember, I'm a mature individual. I don't use the word old anymore. I prefer the word mature. But I heard a new group. It isn't senior citizens or silver citizens, but the latest phrase to use is golden oldies. That's me. I'm a golden oldie. I'm probably three times as old as some of you electricians watching this videotape. So giving that little discourse gives me a chance to catch my breath. Now we go the rest of the way. Notice that the ball of my foot is right out at the tip end of the step. Now when the pedal hits, I've got a 55-degree bend. All you do, it's like a stick shift. Just take the toe of your foot, lift it up, and it drops into second gear. Now you can go the rest of the way. Now I prefer, at this point, to get back here. Let's say about 4 o'clock. Now you can get plenty of arm pressure on the handle. Remember that doing these little bites doesn't reflect the ripple in the conduit that you're bending. As you'll see a little later. It's just easier to take it in little bites as you go along. So as you complete the 90, I'm not quite out on 90 yet. Am I on the money yet? I think so. Not quite. Give it one more touch. And that should measure 20 inches. Right on the stick. Now a bend like this makes a much prettier job than if I used an elbow and 2 couplings. And it's much cheaper. It's a lower cost job and it's a prettier job. So, fellas, that's the technique to use in working with foot pedal benders because the technique is simple. If you use plenty of foot pressure and don't get too much pull with your arms. Now, when making offsets with this power jack bender, make your 30-degree bends or your 45-degree bends on the floor, just as I have demonstrated. But make the second leg of your offset next to a stairwell or a loading dock, so that the first bend can hang over the edge in free air while you're making the second leg of that offset on the flat floor surface. That way, saddle bends and offsets in 1 1/4 thin wall can be made entirely on the floor. Power jacks are extra heavy throughout. It takes 90,000 pounds to shear this tool steel pin that pins the step in place.
Power jack is the original trade name for this tool. Today, other benders on the market now have extended foot pedals. So to be generic, let's just refer to these tools as foot pedal benders.
Now let's talk about light radius benders. You all know that 3/4-inch thin wall benders are used to bend 1/2-inch rigid conduit or 1/2-inch IMC conduit. But it bends rigid conduit to a larger radius that looks neat and trim on the job. I'm going to show you a beefed up bender that's designed specifically for rigid conduit. It makes a 4-inch radius bend in half-inch rigid conduit or in half-inch IMC conduit. Now this bender is a regular 3/4 inch thin wall bender. It makes a radius of 5 inches. This bender is a right radius bender. It also bends the same conduit that the upper bender does, but you can see it makes it to a much shorter radius. Now half-inch conduit, to look neat and trim on a job, should be bent to a 4-inch radius. Now this bender will bend it all right, but it bends it to a large, cumbersome, awkward-looking radius. So that's the reason we beefed up this tool to make a short radius bender that conforms to the proper radius for the proper size conduit. It's made for half-inch conduit and for 3/4 inch rigid conduit. And of course it also bends half and 3/4 inch IMC conduit or half and 3/4 inch aluminum conduit. And it bends it to the right radius. It always looks nice on a job to have a nice trim radius instead of a long sweeping radius to make a good quality job of exposed work. Now I'd like to show you how to remove a kink in half-inch thin wall conduit. I have a bend, a 90-degree bend in this piece of half-inch thin wall, and I'm going to deliberately throw a kink in there using the handle of my bender. Now there's a kink that you would normally throw on the scrap heap and just feed the oil pile. But it isn't necessary. If you simply lay the bender handle over the kink and roll it right back down on the floor, keep sliding it into the handle as you go. Till you get almost down the floor. Now you remove the kink. Now I'm going to straighten up, take those little bumps out, up in here, in the air, where I can see what I'm doing. Now I've got it almost straight. In the very same position. Only this time, I'm going to bend it at right angles to where it was originally. Now notice my foot is going to do most of the bending. I actually coil that metal, force it right back down into the groove so that it's reshaped into a decent, acceptable 90-degree bend. And there it is. I'll remove the kink and I'll put a 90 back in there in another direction. That's a good way of saving the conduit on the job. Don't try it on 3/4 inch, but it works okay on half-inch. One thing that you shouldn't do is try to straighten it out this way. That's fatal. Now I'd like to show you a neat little trick on how to prevent dog legs in offsets. I'm going to make a 30-degree offset with 30-degree angle bends, and I make my first 10. 30 degrees, and then I start my next bend. I'm going to deliberately put a dog leg here, because that is not lining up this way. So I start, I'm down just a few degrees. Now I lay back here and I say, uh-oh, that's not gonna bend right. So I twist it until everything is in perfect alignment. Now even though I started that second part of that offset, It's going to straighten out because I twisted it in the alignment. And now that bend is just as flat as a pancake. Now let's take the next subject. You're stringing conduit on a deck job, and it's not necessary that bends be accurate to the mat's eyebrow. You make a 90-degree bend, and the stub up is an inch or two short. Here's how you can raise the stub an inch or two without wasting a lot of time. The job calls for a 14-inch stub up bend, but you find your stub up is only 12 inches high. All you need to do is make an overbend, like I'm going to do here. The conduit is you're going to overbend it from 90 up to about 130 degrees. Now you take the sleeve of your hand and you straighten it back to 90 degrees and you raise it up to 14 inches. It's as simple as that. Now the next subject is going into narrow petitions with a standard conventional 4-inch radius bend, which was made with a half or 3/4 inch bender on a standard high-rise condominium, for instance, where they have very narrow petitions. If you go into the petition with a standard radius bend, you can get the bend into the center of the petition all right, but the rest of the bend, when they finish the job, will be out in the middle of the room. So the secret is to go in obliquely. Now I'm going to go into this petition by first making a 45-degree bend. This is my 45. I'm going to go into the petition, roll along, and then I can make a standard 4-inch radius bend, and the entire bend is right in the center of that petition. Now you can go into a 1-inch petition if you want to, but this is a wonderful trick to get into narrow petitions with standard radius bends made on a standard bender. On page 25 of the Benfield Conduit Bending Manual, we showed two 90-degree bends close together. Now obviously, if the job requires back-to-back bends close together, the second bend is going to be a tough one to make, because as you're making the bend, you're backing in to the first bend. So the solution is to reverse the bender and pretend you're making a stub-up bend. In other words, instead of using the stopwatch symbol, as you normally would for a back-to-back bend, you make a stub-up bend using the arrow symbol. This way you can make back-to-back bends close together. On quality exposed work, it's best to keep your conduit runs on the flat. By on the flat, I mean that if the run is from a switch on the wall up to a ceiling fan or something like that, you shouldn't run the conduit directly from the switch straight up the wall with a 90-degree bend at the ceiling. Then over to your fan. Such a 90-degree conduit bend at the ceiling corner leaves a big airspace behind it. It's not only a dust collector, but it makes a whole big job. The better way to lay out the run would be to locate the switch 2 or 3 feet off-center, run the conduit up the wall, make a 90-degree bend at the ceiling, run 2 or 3 feet along the ceiling, and then make a second 90-degree bend over to your ceiling fan. With this layout, the entire run is on the flat, and it makes a much more professional-looking job. Now, ladies and fellows, I want you to know that when I say fellows, it includes you ladies too.
I have written a new book, the Benfield Teaching Workbook for Electrical Apprentice Training. It reveals how apprentices can train themselves to make every conduit bend in the business, and do it by using this book as a training director. This teaching text is written in plain, non-technical language, and it is liberally illustrated with photos, diagrams, and tables. It reveals how the Benfield technique is based upon plain middle school arithmetic, no more. What's so different? It closely guides apprentices in every move they make, step by step, move by move, every inch of the way as every type of bend is completed. It not only illustrates stub-ups, offsets, back-to-backs, and 3 and 4 bend saddles, but it invites the student to actually make the bends. All 35 pages are printed on one side only. Thus, the opposite page is blank for notes and calculations. This new workbook and EC&M's Benfield Conduit Bending Manual, 2nd edition, are virtually training companions. The workbook frequently cross-references the EC&M manual for background material. Electrical apprentices that carefully read the workbook and fill in the answers will very likely bend conduits spot on for the rest of his or her days. In my view, apprentice training directors, electrical contractors, electrical construction superintendents, maintenance chiefs, electrical trade unions, VOTECs, and all users of electrical conduits will welcome this new teaching text as the way to go. At the end of the book is a section entitled Jack's Dividend of Tips. There are 17 tips in all, and apprentices will cherish these tips. Here is an example. Tip number 1. On floor bends, stand up on the bender pedal. Apply your full body weight plus stiff leg foot pressure. Do not bend the knee. Tip number 5. When making your own bender or hickey handles, use Schedule 40 merchant pipe and cut tapered threads that jam up tight.
I have in my hand here a Benfield Conduit Bending Manual. This manual, published by EC&M.
This manual is the perfect companion for this videotape. The Benfield technique is based upon simple arithmetic, addition, subtraction, and multiplication. The rules and formulas work no matter what type or size of conduit is used, and they work for all fixed radius benders, hand type, ratchet type, or even sophisticated power benders. The Benfield offset formula is universal. Offset depth times constant multiplier equals the needed distance between bends. Accuracy in the degree of angle is paramount for both offsets and saddles.
The most common bend is the offset. Because offsets are such a common bend, I want to explain the Benfield offset formula once more. The formula is simply this. I'm going to read it to you slowly. Offset depth times the constant multiplier equals the distance between bends. With 30-degree bends, you multiply times 2. The manual explains that the shrink as a result of a 30-degree bend offset is 1/4 inch for every inch of offset depth. Therefore, if you're making a 10-inch offset with 30-degree bends, your bends should be 10 times 2 or 20 inches apart. But where do you put the first mark? In column 3 on page 10 of the manual, the offset table indicates a shrink of 1/4 inch for every inch of offset depth. Therefore, on a 10-inch deep offset, 10 times 1/4 equals 2.5 inches. Your shrink is therefore 2.5 inches as a result of that offset. Therefore, when working towards an obstruction, you place your first mark 2.5 inches ahead of what you really want, because as you complete your offset, you drop back 2.5 inches. On page 11 of the manual is a zip guide which explains how to space bends for a given offset depth. Now let's talk about concentric bending with a hickey. Concentric bends, that's where multiple bends are laying in the same plane, and each bend is a little bit larger in its radius than its neighbor. Prior to bending, place reference marks on your conduit as we show on page 54 of the manual. You place marks in equal segments. On the first row, 9 marks are needed. If working with half-inch conduit or half-inch EMT, the marks should be spaced 3/8 inches apart, and you make 9 little 10-degree bends. On the next run of that same size conduit, you place 9 marks 3/4 of an inch apart and make 9 successive 10-degree bends. On the third run, you place 9 marks 1 inch apart and make 9 10-degree bends. On the fourth run, you should make your marks 1 1/4 inches apart and make 9 10-degree bends. This technique is pretty well covered on page 54 of the manual. Now, with every Benfield bending kit, we furnish a zip guide. Probably many of you have been using the zip guide because we sell these kits by the thousands. In Table F on page 72 of the manual is an illustration of the Benfield zip guide. It prints out the offset formula, and it lists bending tips such as starting a bend for stub-ups at the painted arrow on the tool. Also, a straight-up handle vertical to the floor indicates a 30-degree bend of the conduit. It explains the red notch and the teardrop, and when bending in the air, to apply hand pressure close to the groove to force the conduit to bend on the bottom of the groove because using too much leverage at a distance away from the bender allows the conduit to pop up out of the groove and perhaps cake and give you an inaccurate bend. Such are the typical tips found in the 118-page Benfield conduit bending manual. Now about conduit and concrete deckwork. It's a costly business to run conduit on the deck if concrete buggies or other trains such as the rebar people knock your bends out of plumb. When running stub-ups in the pour, cradle your deck runs. Study sketch A on page 84 of the manual. Note that the conduit run between the stub-ups is cradled. Now, cradling may take an extra few inches of conduit, but you get stability by cradling, and with good wire ties, the run can't move in any direction. When both the stub-ups gang together, wire tie the stub-ups together below the floor level, tie down the horizontal runs at the deck level first, then you wire tie the stub-ups again above the floor level. This sequence is important because it lends rigidity to the run and prevents movement of the stubs due to careless laying of catwalks and so forth.
These are the kind of tips found in the Benfield Conduit Bending Manual. All 118 pages are loaded with hints and tips. Certainly it's a worthwhile investment and the cost is modest. Manuals are published by EC&M. Now, fellows and ladies, in all of this videotape, you'll notice that I haven't used a single technical word. I haven't resorted to trigonometry or sines or cosines or tangents or cotangents or developed lengths or any of those confusing terms. We've simply used plain, down-to-earth, simple language. And if I accomplish nothing else in this videotape, I want to get across the fact that you should think simplicity. It's always a thrill to bend a piece of conduit, no matter how long you've been in the business, and bend it so it fits, without fiddling around with it, without nippling it out or cutting it back to fit. If it lines up so it looks like it's been molded in place, it always gives any electrician a quiet thrill. So good luck and good bending. Goodbye.
Both the video and the manual are available from Benfield International Corporation, Jack Benfield, P.O. Box 2735, Delray Beach, Florida 33447. Call us at 1-800-468-8988 or fax us at 407-276-4358. Be sure to ask for product number 004.